Hello and welcome to the Sky Blue Times YouTube channel. Today I wanted to dive into some of the out-of-possession issues that we saw Manchester City deal with, building on a thread that I've done on X, which you can find linked in the description down below, and just go through some of the screenshots, look at the position of the players, how quick they are to move, to react, focused how they are, how coordinated the backline is, how quick the jumps are, how well they're able to adjust if the opposition does switch up how they do play out from the back. If they do switch to the other side, how well does City move across to deal with that? In some of the older examples compared to what we've seen last season, that we can remember from last season. So yeah, we're going to dive into more details from there. And I think the first place to really start is these statistics, as you can see over the last few years. Particularly last season, you saw Manchester City's possession drop a touch, field tilt drop a touch compared to what we're used to seeing. But there's a few areas where we saw a drop that was a lot more impactful to the way that the team was playing and the results and the performances that they did have. One of those is the opposition build-up percentage. So you can see this is always below 80%, creeped up over the last couple of seasons. And has really become ineffective in the last couple of seasons, City's high press, compared to what we are used to seeing from Manchester City. At the same time, when we look at last season, you're seeing that the aerial duel success rate has dropped off. So you can see here always above 50%, particularly over the last few years has been at a good level. And then when you look at last season, it's the first one of those that drops below 50%. And that speaks to some of the issues that we saw from Manchester City last season, where we saw long balls that teams were playing. They were able to win those long balls, knock it down, play it to a teammate, then they're in space, then they're able to run. We touched on that in another video as well. So it's no surprise that when City are not being successful at winning those kind of long ball situations, managing the second balls, then they are dealing with more transitions. The opposition are in better position centrally to be able to attack the back line, and then you're further exposing the fact that you have a high line, because they're just getting into much better positions to be able to run at our defenders, and then the kind of athleticism that they don't have compared to other defenders is exposed even more so when you're putting them in such poor positions. But I will say on top of that, you know, you're still talking about defenders that, even if they are much more physically dominant and much more athletic, these are still positions they're in which are not favourable at all. Even if you're putting in Konate in these positions every 10 minutes in a game, he's going to suffer just the same as Ruben Diaz will. If we move on to this one here, this is ball recoveries per 90, and this one is a lot more on a negative to look at. As you can see, decline over the last few years, and then last season saw a sizable drop. It's worth bearing in mind that Rodri averages over 8 ball recoveries per 90 across his entire career. So when you're looking at this drop here, that is a Rodri size hole. But then if you're looking at everything else prior, these few seasons here where Rodri's played exceptionally well, he's still been there and the team has still dropped off. So there's still been a decline of some sorts from Manchester City. Not just the fact that you're swapping in personnel like Gundogan and Kovacic to play as a number 6. But there's also been other issues that we'll touch on later in this video. And then if you look at this one here, this is building on what I was mentioning about disrupting the opposition build-up. This is by Mark Stats, well worth following online. And as you can see here, in the 21-22 season, into the treble season, City are effective at disrupting the opposition build-up. And then in the 23-24 season, we saw issues on that. We saw successes as well through the middle portion of the season. And then when we look at last season, the 24-25, there's clearly been a sizable decline from what the level City were at in the 21-22 season. And that's been a kind of gradual thing, but now we are at that point, and that kind of speaks to the position City are in at the end of their cycle. You think about all the players that are aging and coming to the end of their careers and are not anywhere near as effective in their athleticism and the physicality as they used to be when they were much younger. You think about players like Gundogan and Bernardo, the fall off from what they used to be, De Bruyne as well, has been gradual over those last few years, and we've really kind of been hit a lot harder by it last season, along with some of the injuries to central defenders, to Rodri as well. It's kind of brought those issues further to light. Now, if we go back to the Al Hilal game, just to look at a couple of examples from that, you'll notice in this one, this is from Al Hilal going straight back to Ruben Neves, who's dropped in, move across to Koulibaly. City then go out to press up high. Haaland aggressive coming out, applies pressure right away. This is the moment where Koulibaly is about to play that pass. As you can see, Doku's distance is quite big. So it's a lot of distance for him to press, even as explosive as he is. And bear in mind, this is Cancelo that he's playing the ball onto. See the back line fairly organised over on here. Aït-Nouri moving up to play tight to this guy. Gundogan on top here. I believe that was Reiners in the middle. Bernardo moving across. Savinho over here. Then we move to this one. This is the moment that Cancelo receives the ball. And you can see here that Doku's too far away for him to be able to apply enough pressure. Cancelo's a very technically gifted player, and this is more than enough time for him to take a touch, see what his options are, and then make a pass. Gundogan here watching the other player here that's making the move. Again, still backline fairly okay. Aït-Nouri ready to jump if need be, tight on his man. Vardiol moving across. So yeah, that looks fairly okay, apart from the fact that the Doku was just a little bit too slow to move across there. Obviously, you'd ideally like Bernardo to be a little bit tighter over here as well. Then move to this one. Cancelo plays the pass in there. Obviously, Doku coming right across opens that lane up down the line. But even with that, you'd expect Aït-Nouri to be able to apply enough pressure when he's coming from behind. But he does go too aggressive and on the inside. So that leaves the space on the outside for the Al Hilal player to turn and move out. And that particular instance there is an issue that Aït-Nouri I'd expect to improve on over the summer into next season when he does train more consistently with the team, gets in the video room, gets on the pitch and works on these issues. That's a genuine mistake by him. Instead, and as you'll see later on in the video, if he just applies pressure in that situation, allows Doku to come back and support, then Cancelo hasn't got an obvious way to make the run on the overlap, as we'll see in a sec. You'd expect Vardiol to be a little bit more aggressive coming over to help out. And obviously you've got Gundogan right there in front of the player. So he's there to support, but because Aït-Nouri's in on the inside, that then causes all the issues further down the line. You then see that Doku's not coordinated with the rest of the guys, with Aït-Nouri, with Gundogan, with Guardiola in what's going on here. Cancelo comes on the overlap. Nobody's tracking him. Aït-Nouri's moving inside. Doku's moving inside. So that particular issue there, and as you'll see later in the video compared to examples of older City, that's something they have to work on. That must get better, and I think that will be a staple of who's going to play the most as the left winger, and the same with Savinho, Oscar Bob and other players on the right wing. Whoever is effective not only with their end product but without possession, their defensive work, how good they are at tracking back, supporting the fullback, timing their press, etc., is going to be playing most of the minutes. And as you can see with this example here with Doku, he makes the mistake of not tracking a player out here, moving inside and then not keeping up through that. Gundogan comes across, makes a poor effort to be able to win the ball. Obviously, as I mentioned with Guardiola, if he was their support, that would be much more helpful. You've got Diaz that's moved over, you've got Nunes that's moved over, you've got Reiners that's then moving back to fill in. So Guardiola could have come across to be more aggressive and support on that. And then if Gundogan's able to trap the ball, Vardiol's able to deal with Cancelo, and then Aït-Nouri's coming back to support. So you'd be in a better position. It's worth mentioning that in all of these instances, with Jeremy Doku, with Aït-Nouri, with Vardiol, with Gundogan, that all fail to make a foul, that you'll need to do next season for a majority of the season to be able to deal with these situations for the most part. If you go back through a lot of the old City at their very best, plenty of these situations get dealt with by a player making a tactical foul. So in the case of Aït-Nouri, Gundogan and Doku here ain't able to do that. They'll have to do that next season. And then this is just another example of a long ball from Koulibaly, switches out to the far side. And I just wanted to include this because it shows you the back line fairly unorganised with Guardiola here, Aït-Nouri here compared to Diaz. Not in a good line when you're trying to play an offside trap. And then also how bad the shape kind of plays out when they do switch to the other side. So if you're on this one here, you've got somewhat pressure on the ball from Doku, from Haaland, but not enough that it should be. I think Bernardo's here, Haaland should be pushing up more. Then Doku's in a position to deal with this pass here. So that you'd expect that to be different from Haaland. But then when this pass then goes out there, look at the shape that we then have. We have a back line that is not really in a good position to play an offside trap, to track all these runners in an organised way. Obviously, Aït-Nouri's got his guy here, but if you look at all the players here, it's just not in a good spot. Savino's not exactly in a good position to deal with this pass here, to get on top of that. He's going to be late to applying pressure. You've got your two midfielders over here. Doku slowly get back. Haaland slowly move across as well. So you look at that shape and compare that to what we'll see a little bit later on when we get to the older versions of City. It's quite drastic, and part of that will obviously part of that will be, because this is the Club World Cup, because this is at the end of a long season. These are plenty of players that have played a lot of minutes. It's not a lineup that's played week in, week out together. So there's a lot of issues with that. You compare that to what we're seeing from PSG in the same tournament, a fairly set team. You think about some of the players off the bench. It's a lot of the same substitutions, and then the same with the rotations. So you've got players that across the board know exactly what they need to do. The relationships work ever so well. Very intuitive, and they've got all the awareness about where they need to be, where their teammate needs to be, and the space they need to fill if a teammate's going to vacate that space. You compare that to Manchester City in this tournament, where you've got so many new players coming in, you've got old players looking to find form, you've got lineups that have chopped and changed across different games. So it's not really surprised to see this, but it's still worth mentioning that this does need to improve when we do get to next season. You move to this example here. This is Old City. This is 2022 Manchester City playing against Spurs. So this is the 21-22 season. The City team that, as I mentioned at the start, and some of the stats is done ever so well when it comes to out of possession work. And you see in this example how City is set up. Players tight on the ball, a crossover on the back line, midfield set up, staggered, wingers inside. You can see the fullback ready to jump out, see the winger ready to jump out and press. We then move to this example, curve run, force Spurs over to this side, winger ready to jump, fullback ready to jump, midfielder tucked in over here on the opposition player, winger coming across to deal with this other player here, midfield then moving across, centre back, I believe this is Diaz on top of the Spurs player here, Harry Kane marked over here, fullback marked tight over here. You compare that to just some of the examples we just looked at from the Al Hilal game. I think it's pretty obvious the difference in how tight and compact the team is. Spurs then play out wide, wingers get ready to jump, fullback move closer, midfield, as I mentioned, has moved over to support. Diaz is then free to be able to jump on this space down the line. This is what we mentioned when we were talking about Gvardiol in the earlier example, that he's not in an aggressive position that we'll eventually see from Diaz. They then play the ball out wide, then look to play the ball in behind over to this space over here. And as you can see, fullback pushed up, winger pushed up, De Bruyne that's come across, midfielder that's come across, Diaz over here, centre back over here, other wingers come over and track this player. Obviously the fullback is able to deal with this run here. So City have shifted across and still remain tight to all of the players that they were marking. And then this ball over the top, the wingers then able to come and pick this ball up. Play back to the centre back. City then back into their possession, can settle into a rhythm and proceed with their attack against Spurs. We move to this example here. Again, see how well City is set up. Compact to all the players that they need to be compact. Compact in the middle, tight to the players that they need to be tight to. We see Spurs play this one out wide. Winger steps up for them, force him. He goes over the top over to here. And then you see City adjust, so wingers comes out over across. Midfielder then tracking here. Centre back ready to deal with this if the ball goes in behind. Fullback ready to jump over to this side. And then they force Spurs wide. You've got winger over here tight, fullback here, and then Diaz is free, ready if that ball does go behind. Spurs then play this ball over the top, and then the other centre-back is able to come in and deal with that from Harry Kane. City get back possession, and they move on. You move over to this one. Spurs try to quickly switch it from the keeper over to the far side. This is something, if you go back and see City from last season, you would have seen that when the opposition do quickly move it over to the far side, City are not quick enough to be able to deal with that. From the central defenders, the midfielders, the wingers, they're just not quick and coordinated when they do shift across. You look at this old version of City, By the time the ball's come across, you've already got the forward over here, you've already got the midfielder over here, you've already got the fullback ready to apply pressure, centre back moving across, back line in good shape. So already City are able to quickly shift across compared to what we haven't seen from last season. And then because of that quick adjustment, that pressure they're applying, Spurs mess up the pass, and that goes out for a throw-in. And then you look at this one, I believe they're trying to encourage Spurs to play a little bit short in this one, and then playing pressure. Now, if you see here, and this is an example that City have not done it ideally, so the run here is straight, not curved. But even though it's not curved, which ideally you would want that to be a curved run, they're still able to deal with it. Obviously, the back line is still set up with the players that they're tracking. Fullback ready to jump out, keeping track on this guy. Midfielders set up. You then move over where Spurs play. They play 1-2 over here. Then they try and play down the line here. Your midfielder's already shifted across over to support. You've got your other midfielder, your 6 at the base, moving over and tracking the space in the middle. You've got your fullback nice and tight here, but not over aggressive. And then when we move to this one, as you can see, fullback nice and tight, centre back moving across. You've got Kane tracked. You've got the +1 here. You've got your midfielder ready to deal with the ball coming through the middle that would go into Harry Kane. You've then still got Walker over here watching this guy, able to support the back line and get back. So even though that from the initial phase the run wasn't curved, even though it was a nice, quick and aggressive run, City have still managed to adjust and deal with that situation. And primarily when we're looking at the fullback here, compared to what we're used to from City in that goal lead up to the goal from against Al Hilal, the difference here between Aït-Nouri and what is likely to be Cancelo is wildly different, and that's the area he needs to improve on when it comes to next season. I expect him to do so, but that's just that kind of specific area there. He needs to make better decisions. He needs to be tight, aggressive, but know when to be really aggressive trying to win the ball, when to just apply enough pressure. And just the fact that you're being nice and tight to this player puts off that pass and makes it much more difficult for the player to then get space to be able to run in behind. And then, so if you see, they play the pass over into the middle, and then Rodri's able to deal with that area ball, and then Spurs can't play along in this example here. And then when we're looking to some of the examples against Juventus is one of the games that City did do quite well in, I think, in the Club World Cup out of possession, and that gives me a lot of confidence compared to what we saw in the Al Hilal match. Is these examples with dealing with long balls from Di Gregorio. He plays along out to this far side. Nunes is quick to then make that jump over. You've got Rodri then moving across. You've got the back line here. You've got Aït-Nouri who's running back to get in line with this back line. You've already got the midfielders turning to running. And then we just play this on. So Nunes goes over to that aerial duel. Like I said, you've got Rodri over that's covering support. This is just in the first 5 minutes of the match. And then Diaz over here. Rodri come over to support them from coming inside. And then Nunes is then getting back. Kanji tracking the guy in the middle. Aït-Nouri moving back to support the back line. So that's a much better example compared to what we saw last season, where if we were to go back to these situations here where you've got the midfielder in the middle, if this was Mateo Kovacic, if it was Ilkay Gundogan, not only would they be slow to move across over to there, if they did then get across, they weren't very effective at winning this ball here. They were bypassed, and then once bypassed, they weren't able to get back and support. Rodri's much better with his strength to be able to push the player out wide or win the ball himself, compared to Kovacic, compared to Gundogan. And just that example there, swapping out Kovacic for Rodri, swapping out Gundogan for Nico Gonzalez, just that difference there in dealing with those situations will have a huge impact next season when it comes to how City handle situations out of possession. Just those kind of personnel changes with the players with the better qualities to be able to deal with those situations will make all the difference when we go into next season. And then we just move that along to this example, another long ball. So as you can see in this one, Matheus Nunes goes bit too fast, so he's then not able to win the long ball. That we then move along here, but he's able to put the guy off, play a foul, push the ball out. Obviously, you've got Diaz that moves across to be able to support. If the player does get a touch, he can come over and make a challenge. Akanji watching the guy in the middle, Aitanori watching the guy over here, so back line much better than we've seen against Al Hilal. I believe this is Reinders over here, Rodri over here moving across to support. So if they did try and come inside, then Rodri's not far behind to be able to support. And then you've already got Bernardo and Reinders making their run behind, Salvador then coming back. So just that setup alone compared to what we saw against Al Hilal, much better situation for City to be able to deal with compared to what we were seeing there. Even though, as we see at the very start here, News judges to fly that ball wrong, so he's not able to jump out and win that aerial duel, but then City is still able to adjust to that situation with the long ball. We then move to this example. So this is another long ball play through the middle, and Akanji comes across to try and win this aerial duel. So this is you can see, so he comes across to win his aerial duel here, leaves another guy free. You've got Diaz 1v1 with Livic, News not yet back, Aitanori not yet back. As we go back to the original one when they were playing this, as you see, you've got this 2v2 that Juventus are looking to exploit. But then I believe this is Reinders here not in a good position to be able to win that aerial duel, so Akanji has to get pulled out. So just the fact that Reinders is not more central and in a better position to win that duel compared to the player that's in the middle, Akanji then has to step out. Akanji doesn't win that challenge. Juventus are able to knock that down and then eventually able to play and be able to run at the City goal. Now, these are situations right here that City struggled with the last season with the aerial duels, winning those long balls, and then the second ball that comes off that. And you compare that to the likes of PSG with Marquinhos, with Pacho, and then having Vitinha and João Neves being able to deal with those situations in the middle of the park. They were very good at that. They've been very efficient in moving the ball after they won it. Whereas you look at Manchester City last season, this is an area they really struggled in. And once you lose this long ball here, and then you're not able to deal with the knockdown with the second ball, the opposition have all this space. They have a very advantageous position to be able to run at the Manchester City back line. And then you're in a situation that, quite frankly, not many central defenders in the world are able to deal with week in, week out, all game long. So you have to deal with these situations better next season if you're Manchester City. You do have to win these balls. You have to have your midfielders in a better position. And obviously, if you swap in Rodri for Reinders, he's going to be in that central position. He's going to be able to win those aerial duels. Nico Gonzalez the same compared to Reinders, compared to what we saw last season with Kovacic and Gundogan. And then also that speaks to who are your central defenders you're picking. So if it's Vardiol playing there compared to Akanji, somebody that's much better than him in the air, he's had a better opportunity to win that ball. And then also with the fullbacks that are really slow to get back and support, that's something again to work on. You think about Aitanori being brand new as a player in here that's going to become a starting left back. These are just little things for him to learn and to improve on next season. And then, as I mentioned, they're then able to run at your back line just because you didn't win that initial long ball and then you weren't able to deal with the second ball. And that's something Guardiola goes on about all the time, dealing with the second balls, dealing with the long balls. And at the start of the video, as I showed you with the aerial duel success rate going down, these are the very situations that City struggle with and then created last season because they weren't decisive in those duels and then they weren't efficient at moving on the ball if they did win the second ball. And then this is just the last thing I wanted to mention from the Juventus game. If you go back to City the first few games of last season, when I believe we had Kovacic the 6, and then the 2H you'd have Bernardo and you have De Bruyne, and they were punching out and applying a good amount of pressure. That was unsettling teams when they were trying to circulate the ball around the block. Whereas you look at this here, really quite passive. Brian is in line with Rodri, Bernardo. Doku's not able to jump out a little bit more. So if Reinders did step out that bit more, Doku stepped out that little bit more, you would stop Juventus being able to play the balls over to this space over here and switch it really quite easily. But because they're just holding that shape and then not applying good pressure, it opens up these passes for Juventus to be able to play around the City block. So yeah, that brings me to the end of the video. Only a quick one, just going through some of those examples from the Al Hilal game, looking at some previous versions of Manchester City when it's coming to next season. As I've mentioned throughout, I think having a proper rest, having a proper break for the players will be very beneficial when they come back for next season. Obviously, from the kind of like the physical aspect of that, of having that break, but then also being able to just disconnect from everything and refresh yourself and come back and be focused. And focus is going to be very important, as we saw for all the examples of how City played last season. You can see all the players were switched on about what they needed to do, what the opposition players were doing, the players they were marking, where were they, the spaces they need to be in. They were focused at all times, compared to City in the Club World Cup, particularly in the Al Hilal game, not focused at all times. So you need to be able to maintain that, and part of having that break will be able to refresh the players to come back and then be determined to be focused for 90 minutes. Training time, as I mentioned throughout the video, that's going to be very important, particularly for the new signs, to get on the pitch, to train these things, to get into games, make these mistakes, work on them, see them in action, and make those kind of improvements. That will take time. You just can't fast forward through all of that, and particularly for the new signings, they're going to get that kind of time when we get to next season, and into the first couple of months. I expect to see some improvements in that aspect for them. Personnel changes, as I mentioned throughout this, having Rodri as your number 6 is going to eliminate a significant amount of the problems. Same with Nico Gonzalez. It's going to eliminate a lot of your problems just by swapping out the personnel to have somebody that is in the right position much more consistently, that's able to win those duels much more consistently, and smells the danger, unlike other players like Kovacic, like Gundogan, when they're playing as their number 6. So that's going to be one thing. Backline being coordinated, as we saw throughout all the different clips, some examples where they weren't, some examples where they were. The best version of City, the backline is tight to the players that they're marking, is able to stay in a good straight line when they're trying to play the offside trap as well. City weren't able to do that consistently through the Club World Cup. That's something they'll have to do better next season. The wingers I touched on, having better relationships. Obviously, Jeremy Doku is the example that I used in this video, but there are issues with all of the wingers. If you go through all of their games, I believe Oscar Bob is probably the very best out of all of them, as Guardiola has mentioned plenty of times in press conferences last season. And for me, that's going to be very key to what wingers are going to be playing the most, because you have to be able to maintain that focus, as I mentioned, on the players that you're marking, to be able to read the triggers well, to arrive and give the opposition a little time, apply all that pressure, force mistakes. That's going to be really crucial, as well as tracking back, being coordinated with your fullback about who's picking up which player, and then getting back to be able to support them as well. That's going to be crucial for the wingers to be able to support the likes of Aït-Nouri, whether it's Mateus Nunes, whether it's another fullback that City do go for a new right back, who knows. But the relationship between the wingers and the fullback is going to be crucial if they want to be able to press much better next season. The midfielders coming across, as I mentioned, with personnel changes. I think when you're talking about Reinders playing as a number 8 who can cover a lot of ground very easily all game, when you're talking about Rodri who's a lot more switched on with his positioning in the middle, that's going to make a big improvement for City out of possession, as well as having the midfielders moving across a lot better. And then we've already seen from Foden, from Cherki, if either of them are playing in the 10, both are more than capable of covering that ground and getting across to be able to apply pressure in the right moments. But that will take time to kind of pick up across the season. And then final thing just to touch on is Erling Haaland. Guardiola's mentioned that for Erling Haaland, it's about those first 2 actions. You need to be aggressive. You look at Dembele in a tournament for PSG. He's not somebody that's winning the ball lots and lots and lots of times. He's not somebody making loads and loads of tackles. But those first 2 actions on the centre-back, on the goalkeeper, he is so aggressive. And you can see the intent that he has when he's pressing these players. You need that from Erling Haaland. We've seen that recently in the game Norway played against Italy. Erling Haaland that had that same kind of like aggressive energy. He can definitely do that. And you have somebody like Haaland running at you with that kind of energy. It's definitely frightening for any centre-back to have somebody like that running at you. And when we're going into next season, that's something that hopefully we'll get to see from Erling Haaland consistently across the season. If you if you roll the time back to the start of the season when we're talking about the game against Chelsea, the game against West Ham, we did see that, as well as I just mentioned for the national team. Haaland absolutely can do that, be decisive and aggressive in those first two actions. It's then on the team to be able to support him, and as we saw over the course of the season, that broke down the press from the whole team. So then to have the confidence to be aggressive pushing up as the guy leading the press is very hard to do when the team doesn't support you either. So yeah, when we get to next season, I do think we'll see that from Erling Haaland much more consistently. And for City to be at their very best pressing, to be at the very best out possession, they also need Erling Haaland to lead in the way that he definitely can do, that we've seen so many times in a City shirt, but not as much last season, that we've seen him do for Norway. So yeah, that's pretty much everything. If you have anything else that you think I've missed in this video, please let me know in the replies below. This is just intended to be an overview, go through many examples, give my kind of general thoughts, rather than be very, very specific and all that. But yeah, let me know anything that I've missed down below. If you haven't liked the video, please make sure you like the video. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on the next one. Otherwise, we'll be back with plenty more content this week.